Hey, welcome back. We're going to do some more chain rule here. So we're still in section 3.6, but now I'm moving on to problem 58. Problem 58 has many parts. I'm going to do a few of them. We're going to start with part B. Okay, so this chain rule, in my opinion, is not so real-life applicable. However, these problems like this where you use charts and you are tested really hard on your knowledge of the chain rule, the product rule, the quotient rule, all things like that are huge on the AP test. So I want to make sure we went over a few examples like this. Okay, so here we are, part B. They give us this really complicated function. They don't tell us what f of x is, they don't tell us what g of x is, but they ask us to evaluate the derivative of this complicated function when x equals 0. Okay, once again, this takes a lot of organization. Okay, first thing I'm noticing is I have some stuff multiplied by some stuff. Product rule, right? Alright, so here's my first factor. Here is my second factor. Alright, so remember the product rule is going to be the first factor times the derivative of the second factor. Alright, now the second factor here is something cubed. So we got to go 3 g squared of x, right? So that's the power rule. But what we are applying the product rule to is not just a variable, but it's an entire function. So then we need to multiply it by the derivative of the function. Okay, so it's the first times the derivative of the second, which is this long thing, plus the second times the derivative of the first. Alright, so do you see how that's pretty complicated and we need to be organized about that? The key thing here is recognizing the product rule, which means, we have to use the u v prime plus v u prime, right? It means we have to use that. Plus, when we take the derivative of this second factor, we have to do some chain rule, which shows up right here. Alright, so now what we're going to do is use the chart to turn this long, complicated thing into some numbers. Alright, so we're evaluating when x equals 0. So we're going to use this top row right here. Alright, so f of x when x equals 0 is 1. Then we have a 3. Then we have g of x squared. Alright, so g of x when x equals 0 is 1. So we have 1 squared times g prime of 0 is 1/3. Alright, now we have g of 0 cubed. So 1 cubed times f prime of 0, 5. Alright, so now let's finish simplifying. Alright, so exponents first. So 1 squared is 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 1, 3. 3 times 1/3 is 1. And then we have 1 cubed is 1 times 5 is 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. Alright, so there's part B. Let's move on to part C. Alright, so part C, I see some division, quotient rule, right guys? Remember, bottoms up. So if we call the top u and the bottom v, bottoms up, v u prime minus u v prime all over the bottom squared. Okay, so that's what we need to do, the quotient rule. Alright, so now let's give this a shot. So it's going to be bottoms up. So g of x plus 1, that's the bottom, times the derivative of the top, that's f prime of x, minus the top, f of x, times the derivative of the bottom. The derivative of the bottom is just g prime of x, right? Because the derivative of 1 is 0, so that goes away. And then that's all over the bottom, g of x plus 1 squared. Alright, so now let's start plugging some things in. This time they're telling us x equals 1, so we're going to use the bottom row. Alright, so g of 1 is negative 4 plus 1 from this guy. Then f prime of 1, negative 1/3, minus f of 1, 3, g prime of 1, negative 8/3, all over g of 1, negative 4 plus 1 squared. Alright, let's do some simplifying. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3 times negative 1/3 is positive 1. Negative 8/3 times 3 is going to be negative 8, so minus that, so that's plus 8. And then negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. So we're going to have 9 over 9, which is 1. Alright, part C, done. Let's move on to the next one. Part D. Alright, here's another situation where it gets complicated. Alright, so we have f of g of x. Alright, so we got to take the derivative of the outside first. So f prime, still evaluated at g of x, but now we got to multiply by the derivative of the inside part. Alright, so that's the chain rule kind of in its definition. Alright, is that if you have f of g of x, so a composite function, you got to take a derivative of the outside, then the derivative of the inside. Alright, so that's what we're looking for here. Evaluating it can be a little bit tricky too. I circled the top row there because we're dealing with x equals 0. Alright, so we're going to use the top row. Alright, remember when we are evaluating something or simplifying something, we want to start on the inside and work our way out. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is figure out what g of 0 is. G of 0 is 1. Alright, so I'm just going to replace g of x with 1. Alright, now let's see what we can simplify. F prime of 1. Now, notice the x value is 1, right? So f prime of 1 is negative 1/3. Alright, so this part's taken care of. Then we got to multiply g prime of x. But here we're going back to 0. Alright, so g prime of 0 is, sorry, wrong row, 1/3. Alright, negative 1/3 times 1/3 is negative 1/9. Alright, if you have any questions, please write them down and bring them to class. See you tomorrow.